Good evening, members of the Council.
Good evening, Madam.
Can I ask the Council to join me in saying the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Please be seated. I have received apologies for Councillor Adrian Hughes and Councillor Claire Sullivan. Are there any further apologies for absence? Councillor Brown and Mogle. Moving on to the declarations of interest. Any prior declarations of interest made under the Members' Code of Conduct have been published online. Members should also note the advice of the monitoring officer. Any member who declares a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest will only have to withdraw from the meeting if there is a specific reference to the item in which they have an interest during the debate. Likewise, they will be able to vote on the budget provided that the item in which they have an interest is not specifically referred to in the motion or amendment put to the vote. I now invite members to declare any additional interests.
There appear to be none, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I have no additional announcements to make at this meeting, so I call on the Leader of the Council, who I understand wishes to move the suspension of the relevant Council procedure rule.
Procedure Rule 22.1, the time restriction of 5 minutes referred to in Council Procedure Rule 14.4 be suspended to enable the Cabinet Member for Finance, Legal and Human Resources and the lead spokespersons from the political groups to speak for longer than 5 minutes on this report, and to enable the Cabinet Member for Finance, Legal and Human Resources to speak for longer than 5 minutes in exercise of the right to reply to the debate.
Is there a seconder?
Formally seconded, Madam Mayor.
All agreed? That is carried. Medium-term financial strategy and council tax setting 2024 to 25. I call on Councillor Steve Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to begin today by thanking the Section 151 officer and his team for the hard work that they've put into this budget and for their continuous work throughout this year. I think it's safe to say that this year has brought some unforeseen national financial challenges. However, despite these challenges, we are standing here tonight presenting a legal budget to this chamber. A budget which provides record investment into adults and children's social care, demonstrating our unwavering commitment to those who are most vulnerable in our community. It maintains our 2 hours free car parking to support our towns and high streets and protects services like leisure centres and libraries, which we know are important to many. Like other councils across the country, we've seen a rise in demand and costs for social care placements for both adults and children. And as a result, we've experienced significant, unforeseen financial pressure. I do, however, think it's important that some locally, I do, however, think it's important to acknowledge that locally, some of the additional pressure tells a success story behind the scenes. The unforeseen adult social care pressure represent a significantly reduced waiting list of over 500 more people receiving much needed packages of care, and more people receiving mental health support packages than ever before. Dudley has always been a low tax, low spending authority. This has always been and remains a point of pride. It's right that we look to get best value for money on behalf of our residents, and that we don't ask them to pay any more than is absolutely necessary. Unfortunately, what this can mean is that in times of national financial stress, our authority does not have the relief of a large reserve to lean on. Historical decisions supported by both sides of this chamber impacted massively on our current levels of revenue and reserves. However, whilst hindsight can be a wonderful thing, it is more prudent for us to look to the future. Whilst our reserves are modest compared with other comparable authorities, our focus remains on strategic allocation of our budget. We've diligently heeded the advice of our Section 151 officer and external auditors, implementing measures to secure our financial sustainability. That's easy for me to say. Last week in this chamber, we heard the statutory recommendations for our external auditor. We take those recommendations seriously, and we are already well on the way to implement them. We've worked hard to identify further savings achieved by implementing spending controls and the use of grants, as well as reviewing our capital programme so as to reduce the cost of borrowing. Some of these decisions have not been easy. However, we've prioritised redesigning existing services and streamlining back office processes, such as reducing the size of our office estate, reflecting new ways of working, making faster progress than we expected with the transfer of school catering, making efficiencies in social care direct payments, and continuing to make progress with family safeguarding, providing additional support so that wherever possible and safe, children can stay with their birth families. As recommended by the external auditor, we have built in a central budget contingency as a prudent measure. We aim not to rely on this contingency, and we hope to put the money back in reserves as soon as we can. We are pleased that our budget proposals no longer rely on transferring money from the earmarked reserves to the unallocated general fund. We remain committed to the regeneration of the borough, and progress can be seen with the building of the Dudley interchange underway and the metro stage to Dudley nearing completion. Dudley is undergoing its most ambitious regeneration in decades. And we are continuing to see investors looking to bring business into our borough. Now, this is not the story of a failing council, but that of a council with ambition and determination to thrive in the face of adversity. I want to recognise that it has been another hard year for many of our most vulnerable households. Our benefits team worked tirelessly to administer council tax reductions, housing benefit, discretionary housing payments, and the household support fund to support these residents. The team are at the front line of managing an increasing demand for support. For that, I would like to thank them and all the other teams in my portfolio for their hard work in difficult circumstances. The financial pressures that have fallen upon households have also fallen upon the council. Madam Mayor, I would like to take a moment to mention something positive that has almost passed without notice. Each year, the council is required to have their accounts signed off by the auditors. This process can often take some time and can provide some uncertainty. This year, Dudley Council was in the top 10% of local authorities as at December 2023 to have their accounts signed off by the auditors. This doesn't make headlines, but it's important. We have a financial mountain to climb, but having accurate accounts means that we know where we stand. And the Section 151 officer and I thank the team for their hard work on this. Madam Mayor, we are not complacent about the long-term outlook. We know that to continue operating within a legal and sustainable budget and avoid a Section 114, we will have to radically reduce the total operating model of the council. Work is underway now and will not wait for the ordinary autumn budget timetable. We want to be approving new savings and income measures as soon as the summer. This year, I wrote to the Right Honourable Michael Gove, detailing our current challenging financial position. I raised my concerns that we are facing great uncertainty around the accelerating costs of social care for both adults and children, along with any future inflationary pressures. We are pleased this year to have received additional assistance with this, along with a commitment to continue this support into future years. However, I do intend to liaise further with the government regarding the need for more assistance to help combat the uncertainty that we are currently facing. We also know that we need to put up our historically low council tax. Even with the increase proposed tonight, ours will still be the lowest council tax in the West Midlands and one of the lowest in the country. Madam Mayor, I move this report and its recommendations.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. I now call on Councillor Shaukat Ali to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. We know that the Tory administration opposite does not get the basics of finance and how to lead an administration. So I will slowly and clearly spell out for them how the council has ended up in the perilous situation. Madam Mayor, today is a crucial moment, the most significant in my 24 years of service. We are not just debating a budget, we are deciding the future of our council and whether we will have one. The situation is critical. Years of Conservative mismanagement have left us on the brink of financial collapse, and we face the consequences tonight. We on this side understand the significance of bankruptcy. We have consistently warned about the Conservatives' reckless spending and what it will do. The day of reckoning is here. The consequences of their pool and booze-soaked holidays in the south of France at the council's expenses are staring us in the eyes.
Please, could you allow Councillor Shaukat Ali to speak?
Councillor Harley acknowledged recently our warnings, even moaning that we had told him too often and at every opportunity. Unfortunately, Madam Mayor, it's too late, too little. A Section 114 notice, bankruptcy looms. The financial mismanagement threatens essential services like education, social care, and health care. The public will pay the price of their mismanagement. This isn't just a financial crisis. It's a threat to our entire community and what we offer to our young and old here in Dudley. This crisis didn't appear overnight. It's the result of the Conservative government's dismantling of public services, wielding austerity like a blunt instrument, supported by the local Conservative leadership in Dudley. Those opposite, Madam Mayor, have made decisions which have led to this. This is not an accident and not just predictable. We told them that this would happen. In their arrogance, they ignored our warnings. The residents didn't cause this, yet they are the ones who will bear and suffer the most. The scars of this fiscal brutality run deep, etched into the very fabric of our community, a direct consequences of the Conservatives' decisions. Never before this council has been confronted with a challenge of this magnitude. The constant defection of Conservative councillors and daily scandals demonstrate that even the people in their group have lost the confidence in their leadership. Councillor Harley is clearly not listening to his own members. We are not surprised he ignores the opposition and doesn't care about what the public think or say. Councillor Harley knows it all, Madam Mayor, and Councillor Clark nods attentively in the fear that he may be forced to join the growing independent party over there. Decades of neglect by Tories have brought us to the brink of collapse. It is important that the origins of the current mess are acknowledged. It was the Tory and Liberal Democrat coalition government who started the relentless assault on public services, implementing austerity measures that left our communities reeling. Brexit without a plan added another layer of uncertainty, and the devastating blow of the COVID-19 pandemic rocked our foundations. The war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, the Liz Truss mini-budget that sent mortgage and interest rates soaring, further worsening our suffering, and now the spectre of the recession looms large. Madam Mayor, let me be crystal clear. These are not random acts of nature. They are the consequences of political choices made over the past 14 years by the 5 Tory Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors, an economic crash, a mortgage bombshell, record NHS waiting lists, and billions of pounds handed to the Tory party friends. A Conservative government economic failure, coupled with 13 years of Dudley Tory Council incompetence and mismanagement, has brought this council to a critical juncture. The impact of their failure is being felt by every resident, every family, every business in Dudley. People are struggling to make ends meet. The Which magazine found that 1 in 7 households are skipping 1 meal a day due to the cost of living crisis. We know in Dudley, food bank use is on the increase. Child poverty is on the rise, and around 17% of households in the borough are faced with fuel poverty. The Household Support Fund, which they failed to administer efficiently, was a lifeline for vulnerable people grappling with the cost of living crisis, will be stopped at the end of this month. This will add more misery to those who need the help the most. Over the past 14 years, local government has been brought down to its knees by the Tory government, tearing it down brick by brick from its foundations to create structures that have become fragile and hollow. This year, these structures have started to fall apart. Councils up and down the country have seen real terms cut in their spending power by around 19%. Dudley has not been spared, with its funding cut by £122 million since 2010. Councillor Clark publicly accepted that this cut is because of 14 years of Tory government failure. His plea to Rishi Sunak for significant cash injection didn't get any attention, and we have not heard a peep from the borough's Tory MPs calling for fair funding for Dudley. The recent local government fell well short of addressing the deeper issues at hand and merely serves as a temporary fix, giving it on the one hand, taking it away on the other. A clear admission by the Conservatives of their failure to find a sustainable way to fund local services. Not only this, they failed to deliver on the fair funding review, which started in 2016, because Rishi Sunak has been too busy taking money away from deprived urban areas like Dudley and giving it to leafy areas like Tunbridge Wells. Madam Mayor, whilst they have shied away from calling on their government for fair funding for Dudley, we are steadfast in our commitment and will not shy away regardless of who is in government. The last Labour government provided certainty and sustainability with 3-year settlements. The Tory government resorted to 1-year, one-off settlements. We will call on the incoming Labour government to provide integrated, long-term, sustainable settlements, which will give certainty and the ability to plan for the long term. Madam Mayor, despite the millions put into the budget last year by increasing the council tax, the Conservative administration still failed to meet budget targets, resulting in a staggering £14.1 million deficit, a clear demonstration of their incompetence. Their previous budget plans for 21-22 and 22-23 also failed due to bad investments and contract losses. Not a single regeneration plan developed by the Dudley Conservatives has delivered in the borough. Excessive spending on temporary workers, consultants and legal fees has been the backbone of their decision-making. Can't make a decision, let's pay someone else to make it for us. That's the Conservative motto. Madam Mayor, this year, they have failed to achieve £3.2 million through trading activities and made a loss of £800,000 from the energy to waste contract. £2.6 million loss from leisure centres, £281,000 loss from cafes, and £186,000 loss from the Brooks Bistro Cafe. So much for their commercialisation rhetoric. It appears their enthusiasm might have overreached reality. There is a looming risk to write off £2 million for loans to Resonance Music College at Brierley Hill and to the Black Country Innovative Manufacturing Organisation that runs the VLR because they are struggling. A £6.7 million business rates deficit, despite offsetting using COVID grant, there is still a concerning £1 million gap. Madam Mayor, this year they spent £14.5 million on interim agency workers, £1 million more than the previous year, and £1.9 million on consultants. £552,000 on redundancies, with a total of £28.3 million over the last decade. £4.7 million on paying interest on loans. £2.4 million on external legal fees and £800,000 for locums. £15,000, Madam Mayor, on hiring 2 quad bikes to tackle weeds across the borough, only to find out that they are now tied up into a contract that cannot be terminated until 2025, despite them trying. £547,000 on developing the local plan, on top of the £316,000 spent on developing the Black Country plan, a total of £863,000, Madam Mayor. £2 million on the failed Cavendish House regeneration design and development competition, lining the pockets of the consultants who have proposed a housing scheme that lacks the vision and ambition our town deserves at this prime location. Over £2 million, Madam Mayor, spent in buying 8 luxury homes. Housing cannot operate under different rules. It must function with greater efficiency and effectiveness. Our tenants deserve value for their hard-earned money. They wasted £40,000, Madam Mayor, of taxpayers' money on a trip to sunny south of France, which we know the issues are still ongoing in relation to governance. And there is an eye-watering £20 million in uncollected debts and outstanding invoices, which would make significant difference to the council's financial sustainability. Madam Mayor, eyebrow-raising amounts that paint a bleak financial picture of this council and why the Tory council has got itself into such a mess. We have also learned the future of the Eton School is up in the air. The metro extension to Brierley Hill is not fully funded as claimed by Councillor Harley at the last council meeting. There is no approved business plan for the extension, and there is an expectation of £15 million contribution from the council. How on earth is that going to be possible with the council's financial position as it is? And might I say, Madam Mayor, the 4,000-seater football stadium hasn't materialised, which he promised. And to date, they have failed to bring Dudley Town football back home. Councillor Harley seems over-enthusiastic about the ice rink, with posters plastered around the council house without there being anything concrete, substantive. The site will probably end up with housing. Our roads are blighted with deep and dangerous potholes. Whilst the number of potholes has increased, those repaired have decreased and are taking longer and longer to repair. You only have to drive on the roads to see the condition of our roads. There has been little progress on the much talked about entertainment quarter. Would you believe, with indoor cricket in the former museum building? Another one of Councillor Harley's overpromised and underdelivered promises. There is a £30 million risk hanging over the head of this council as a result of the deficit in the dedicated schools grant. Madam Mayor, they kept the lid on the self-referral to the housing regulator regarding the council housing health and safety issues. We had to force them to hold an extraordinary meeting to make it public. Now £3.25 million for lining the pockets of consultants. There are no confirmed estimates of how much all this will cost. With such failures piling up, the question arises, how can the council not avoid bankruptcy? Madam Mayor, the Tory administration have let down the people of Dudley, demonstrating a track record marred by incompetence and mismanagement. It is about time for Councillor Clark, Councillor Harley and the Tory administration to shoulder the responsibility for their failures and apologise to the public. They need to be honest with the people, acknowledge that their actions have jeopardised the future of this council and the services people rely on. Madam Mayor, I must emphasise that we bear no responsibility for their budget. It is entirely of their making. While the council finances gradually declined, they sat on their hands, allowing the situation to worsen each passing day. More service cuts and more council tax is on the cards. £49.7 million cuts in services over the next 3 years. A maximum of 4.99% council tax increase, a 7.7% rise in council rents, and a staggering 121% increase in service charges from £5.20 per week to £11.54 per week, and charge for green waste collections. After 13 years of providing telecare services, they have now introduced £250 annual charge for vulnerable pensioners and the disabled. Year after year, they have failed to deliver their budgets, raiding reserves at a rate of between £10 to £15 million per year to balance the books. And this year's budget, the £2.2 million reserve, which just barely gets the council over the setting the legal budget, appears to be inadequate to meet any unexpected pressure, and only allows for a budget to be set that is perilously legal. The reserves will fall to around 4% by March next year, from which point the outlook is unsustainable. This is a deeply concerning situation. Dudley residents will end up paying more for less as a direct result of the Conservative and this administration's failures. There are proposals in this budget that are risky, Madam Mayor, including £3.7 million from continuing healthcare clients, which we believe will be difficult and challenging to achieve. The removal of £750,000 from the most vulnerable families in our borough. The transfer of £3.3 million for tackling pressures in adult social care to the Central Contingency Fund. There are critical gaps in the budget, including insufficient provisions for factors such as awards, business rates, lack of general price inflation, changes in borrowing rates, and care provision for vulnerable adults. A 1% increase in each of these areas will hit the council with £9.7 million to its revenue costs, presenting a clear risk to the council's overall financial position. Madam Mayor, the fate of leisure centres, library services, and town halls hang in the balance. The Tory administration is considering options for ceasing, for reducing, for outsourcing or merging services. This means that every service offered by this council is now on the line, fighting for its survival. Councillor Harley said that their plan will not mean closing community centres, borough halls and leisure centres at a recent meeting. Madam Mayor, their track record tells a different story. Their total operating model is another name for more cuts to frontline services that people rely on. There is significant risk that during the next financial year, it will become necessary for the Director of Finance to issue a 114 notice, in effect, bankruptcy. The external auditors, as we know, Madam Mayor, for the first time last week, attended the council meeting and made statutory recommendations, highlighting the risk of bankruptcy and identified significant weaknesses in the council's financial sustainability, governance, as well as economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Whilst 19 councils across the country have been handed funding to prevent them from collapsing into bankruptcy, this council withdrew its £10 million application because they did not have the confidence that their government will offer them any support. Madam Mayor, failure after failure after failure is the hallmark of this Tory administration. We cannot allow our communities to bear the brunt of their financial mismanagement and incompetence. When Labour takes control in May, I promise that we will prioritise transparency and accountability to be our guiding principles. We will be honest with residents about the state of what we have inherited. We will investigate the decisions that led to the council leading the council to this perilous financial situation and involve the community so that they know who was responsible for the mess. Madam Mayor, we will rebuild, reform and do things differently to secure a stable future for the council. We will secure investment and regeneration in our towns, tackle the scourge of antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, fix the potholes that blight our roads, restore pride in our communities and support residents through the cost of living crisis. Most importantly, Madam Mayor, we will not mismanage taxpayers' money. We will be open and honest about how we spend their money. In the face of adversity, we find our strength. We on this side will rise above the challenges and chart a course that not only preserves the council, but revitalises it. We are a borough with a rich history, a borough that has weathered storms before, and a borough that will emerge stronger from this trial under a Labour administration. We on this side, Madam Mayor, are absolutely clear about the scale of the problems and the financial mess we would inherit when we take control of the council in May. Our residents deserve better than financial instability and the looming threat of bankruptcy. It will be long, hard slog to rebuild our services that over the years have been decimated by the Tories, but we assure you that we will deliver a better future for our residents. They deserve transparency, responsibility under a Labour administration. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I now call on Councillor Mark Westwood to speak on behalf of the Independent Group.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You'll be pleased to know this will be very short and sweet. I just want to keep it local, really, in terms of, for me, well, not many moons ago, we were a 4-star council for our budget performance. We had people nationally coming to Dudley to look at the way we managed our budget. Where on earth has it gone wrong? I never thought I'd be standing in this council house looking at a budget that we've got now that is really cutting services, impacting on our local people and making their lives even tougher. Never mind what's going on nationally. We've got people they're using food banks. We've got people who are desperate in their houses. We've got people that need our support. Whilst I understand now we talk about that we low tax, low spend, get all of that. Where was the forward thinking in the leadership? Why did nobody think, do you know what, we need to put a little percentage on here, a percentage on here. But now, what do? We slap them in the face with 4% rises, 7% this, 7%, oh, and by the way, pay for your waste. How on earth does that work? I just do. It's a true leadership and true business sense. You would surely be looking at putting up the payroll, putting up the rises over a year and year and year and year on. Now, from what I've been told by the professionals, I have to add, potentially we could be looking at an 8% pay rise next year, 8% pay rise the year after. Let's not fool our local communities. They are going to be paying for this for years to come. This is not about this year. This is about next year. It's about the year after. So please, let's not be fraud in terms of, let's be honest and upfront with the people of our community. This is going to cost them for years to come, whether that's in their libraries, whether we've already stripped them of their funding for their local communities. So, you know, again, all I would say is, please, let's be honest, because Councillor Clark mentions about we've got the school catering and we've got that up and running and that's saved X amount of money. What he fails to say, I'm at a local school in Gornal. Yes, we've taken it on. However, that's taken school budget to finance the change. So we're in double figures. So yes, you've got the catering's gone, but actually the cost has gone back to the schools if their catering systems don't meet the standards. So, you know, great you've done that, but shame that the schools have had to get more money out of their fundings for it. So, in closing, I think really we have to be moving forward absolutely upfront with our constituents, our wards, and just tell them exactly how it is. Let's not hide behind the fact we have got pain to come over the next 3 to 4 years. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. I call on any of the speakers now to the original motion. Councillor Priest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I intend to move an amendment to this budget, which was circulated around the chamber. In effect, the amendment will remove the review of library services from this budget. Colleagues, this budget might be legal, but it's certainly not fair. I don't think it's fair to propose such devastating cuts across council services that so many people rely on. I don't think it's fair to cut funding for the Unicorn Centre, which supports some of the most vulnerable residents in our borough. I don't think it's fair to cut community forum funding, which provides so much benefit to community groups across the borough. I don't think it's fair that this administration points to unavoidable costs of adult social care last year when there has been so much pointless spend and waste on top. An overspend on Brooks Bar and Bistro, the needless spend on the demolition of Dudley Hippodrome, and the £400,000 trip to the south of France. It's waste and spend from this administration, and it's Dudley residents who are being asked to pick up the bill. But I also don't think it's fair to solely criticise the decisions made by this administration over the last 12 months and the proposals for the next 12 months. Dudley is in this position because of a decade of managed decline by Conservative and Labour administrations. It is not fair that residents of this borough are set to suffer the consequences of two old parties whose greatest ambition is to be a low spend and low tax authority. You parrot the line and wear it as a badge of honour, but the letter from the Director of Finance on the 19th of February could not be clearer. Council tax freezes between 2011 and 2015, a below inflation council tax rise of just 1% in 2017 means that this authority has almost £10 million less a year to allocate. This administration and the Labour administration before it has failed to put away the money for a rainy day. And now the storm is here and we've got nothing left to spend. Our borough is huge, it is diverse, and it spans multiple towns and communities. There's actually very little that residents in the north of the borough have got in common with residents in the south. But what I believe that almost all residents of Dudley have got in common, and the Black Country as a whole, is a shared set of values. I don't think, actually, that people in the Black Country mind being asked to pay a little bit more, provided that they can afford to do so, and most importantly, that they can see what their money is being spent on. This budget doesn't do that. Yes, it's legal, just about, but clearly this administration understands the numbers, but they don't understand their value. This budget pairs sweeping cuts with a maximum council tax rise. It asks residents to pay more and get less. Now, my amendment to protect library services is not a silver bullet that fix all that is wrong with this budget, but it does make it a bit more fair. Libraries are part of the history and social fabric of our borough. I guess we've all got fond memories of our own local libraries, whether that's in our roles as elected members or outside of our public lives. Libraries like Cradley in my ward are community hubs. They've stepped up, provide warm spaces. They have all kinds of different community and activity groups attached to them. They're so much more than just a library. But actually, we should be fighting to protect library services even without this. Local centres of learning should be reason enough to protect them. Now, last year, thousands of people signed a petition to protect our borough libraries. Hundreds protested outside the council house. I and many others in this chamber joined them. So it's a disgrace that less than a year on from that campaign, which forced this authority into a U-turn, that we're asked yet again to consider cuts to library services. It is time for elected members to put our votes where our mouths are. We cannot hold the placard with one hand while voting for or abstaining on cuts with the other. In recent years, there's been far too much hand-sitting in this chamber. The decision that we each make as individuals tonight, we will have to go back to our communities and defend in a few months' time. So my plea to all members in this chamber, of all parties and none, is to vote with your conscience tonight and not with your whip. Back my amendment to make this budget not good, but a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Breeze. Is there a seconder? Does anybody wish to speak on the amendment? So we'll go straight to a vote on the amendment.
Madam Mayor, I think the votes have now been cast in favour of the amendment 11, against the amendment 55 and 1 abstention. So the amendment is lost.
Thank you. So I'll now go back to the original motion. Councillor Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Time and time again, we've heard Councillor Harley and Councillor Clark place the perilous state of Dudley's finances down to a sudden escalation in the cost of providing adult social care and children's services placements. But I wonder if Councillor Clark would be prepared to take this opportunity to admit the real reason we find ourselves in our current predicament, which is the decimation of local authority budgets, which began in 2010 and has left this council ruinously ill-prepared to deal with crises like the current social care emergency. 5 Prime Ministers have failed to deal with the slow car crash, which is adult social care in this country. They have failed to deal with the chronic workforce shortages. They have failed to deal with an unsustainable care market. They have presided over acute underfunding of the sector and a complete absence of meaningful reform. So my first question to Councillor Clark, Madam Mayor, is how many times has he lobbied the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to warn that the cost of caring for the most vulnerable people in Dudley may bankrupt the council? How many times has he banged on the door? Did he speak to Hunt or Hancock, Javid, Barclay, Coffey, Barclay again, or Atkins and ask for help? Moving to the report, Madam Mayor, with reference to Appendix H on page 67, and specifically the proposed closure of the Unicorn Centre, which is a brutal and visceral example of the impact of these cuts upon the most vulnerable members of our community. Can Councillor Clark confirm that this saving really can be achieved without significant detriment to the service received by Unicorn Centre users? Has serious consideration been given to supporting the work of the centre through income generation, cross-border commissioning of day services, or the leasing of excess space at the site to other organisations? Moving down the page, 3.7 million this year, followed by 4.6 million going forward, has been identified as savings from continuing healthcare payments, which this council has effectively been cross-subsidising for years. I'm aware that a consultancy review of a number of high-cost cases has proved that this council has been picking up the huge cost which should have been borne by the NHS. So I wonder if Councillor Clark and perhaps Councillor Rogers can confirm how confident they are that these costs will be recovered and that the required savings will be achieved. Can they confirm, if necessary, this council will pursue every legal avenue to ensure that the Integrated Care Board pay us what they owe? In conclusion, Madam Mayor, poor decisions made by the controlling group over the past several years, an obsession with fanciful regeneration projects over protecting our ability to deliver safe, effective services, and the inability of the Conservative group to take difficult decisions and stick to them for fear of the ballot box means that this authority is in a worse state than most to be able to deal with the social care crisis and why we now stand on a financial precipice. They have ignored the looming cliff edge. They have failed to generate meaningful income, and they have plunged Dudley into likely bankruptcy. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Aston. Councillor Cowell, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Today marks the start of National Empty Homes Week 2024. The idea behind this is to give local authorities the opportunity to publicise the information and assistance available to owners of empty properties and encourage them to bring their properties back into use. It's also an opportunity to offer residents advice on how to report any empty homes that are causing a concern. Under the Council Tax Empty Dwellings Act 2018, Dudley is able to place a premium on council tax. Currently, where a property has been empty and unfurnished for 2 to 5 years, we levy a premium of 100%, giving a 200% total council tax. A property empty for 5 to 10 years faces a 200% premium. After 10 years, this premium is 300%, giving 400% total council tax. These changes started to come in from April 2019, with increasingly punitive charges coming into effect. But little effort has been made to emphasise the consequences of the changes outside of the medium-term financial strategy and the council tax setting process that we're going through tonight. The objective is therefore lost in that it should be used as a driver to encourage more properties back to habitable use, and ideally act as a disincentive to allow properties to sit empty, or worse, decline to a point where they become uninhabitable without significant intervention. The council can, in some instances, use compulsory purchase orders to bring empty properties back into use. Empty dwelling management orders can also be used to target long-term empty homes, causing a nuisance. Again, the options open to the council are not widely and easily understood, which means they are not effective as either a deterrent to the neglect which creates long-term empty properties or as a catalyst for redevelopment. Data from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities shows that as of October 22, 832 homes in Dudley were long-term empty, i.e. empty for 6 months plus. By October 23, the figure was 1,159. This is a significant number of properties, and the increase is a concern where our homeless prevention and response team processed 3,293 applications for homelessness last year, up 18% on 2022. Around 75% of those were roofless or homeless that night. These numbers are likely to grow as the cost of living crisis continues, not least as a result of tonight's proceedings in this chamber. Dudley doesn't seem to have taken advantage of Empty Homes Week, which is a missed opportunity given the inconvenience and difficulties associated with living in proximity to an abandoned or dilapidated property and the unquestionable need for additional housing in the borough. Could the lead member for Finance indicate what further action will be taken by this administration in relation to the problems associated with empty homes and homelessness? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Councillor Catherine Baton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question to Councillor Clark is, will you agree with me that despite all the professional advice that you have been given by the 115 officer, the external auditors and the improvement board, that basically you have gone ahead and set a short-term budget that stores up big problems for the future. We've all heard in this chamber that by 2026, we are back in danger of not being able to set a lawful budget. Now, that might be because you don't anticipate being in control of the council by then, and then you can try to blame the position on Labour. Or maybe it's the eternal optimism on the controlling group of the magic money tree being found. Either way, Councillor Clark, I hope that you can agree that this budget does not address the long-term sustainability of this authority. And I am going to keep making the same speech, because last week's housing budget and this budget, you continue to place the biggest financial burden on the shoulders of those with the least resource to make up for the fact we've had 13 years of huge Conservative underfunding and 5 years of local incompetence. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baton. Councillor Kieran Casey, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I don't think by any means it's an understatement to say this budget's another major blow for our borough, our residents, and it casts huge doubt on this council's ability to deliver services moving forward, in my opinion. And the controlling group might cheer that they've just about been able to set a legal budget, but if we're being honest, this budget is nothing to cheer about. I said this at the same time last year at the budget meeting, and I know other colleagues have said it in their contributions tonight, and I'll say it again. We have another budget in front of us this evening with the Conservatives in control, who are asking residents to pay more and get less. Further council tax increase, charges across the board for a range of services, and more cuts. In particular, for the area I shadow, over £4 million in savings from the Environment Directorate. And although we've heard from the Cabinet Member for Finance this evening about the amount of work that has gone in to putting this budget together, what we won't hear, Madam Mayor, in reality, is an honest acknowledgement as to the real reasons why we're in this position. And the truth is, and I know they don't like being reminded about their record in power, so I think it's only right that we always continue to remind them about their record, is that the situation that we find ourselves in tonight is for two very clear reasons and issues that our borough and this council have faced. Firstly, as Councillor Aston mentioned, the relentless assault on local government by this Conservative government nationally, which is completely ideological. And although I take the points that Councillor Priest made earlier about the Labour Party and about the Conservative Party, it's difficult to take lectures from a party that essentially spent 5 years colluding with the Conservatives and that has put us in this position that we find ourselves in now with the brutal cuts that we've seen over the last 14 years. And secondly, combined with that Tory government nationally, we've had a Tory-run council in Dudley for 7 years now, and that's just been unable to manage the finances of this council properly, unable to stand up to their mates in Westminster, and who have just made the wrong decisions time and time again. So these two things have now led us to where we find ourselves this evening, with Dudley being in a perilous state financially, as well as, by the Cabinet Member's own acknowledgement, external auditors raising concerns about various issues with this council on the way it's run, identifying weaknesses in financial stability, identifying an overuse of reserves when compared to other councils, governance, efficiency and effectiveness, all of which the leader and the Cabinet and the controlling group, I'm afraid, must take responsibility for. But the real tragedy of this, Madam Mayor, is that it's once again decent, hard-working people up and down our borough who are going to be paying the price for this, and it's our borough in general that's going to be hit hard. So however the controlling group try and sugarcoat this budget tonight, this is, we have to admit, a result of their party in Westminster, their inability to stand up to them, along with their mismanagement of the council's finances, which now means we're in a situation where we can see the considerable damage that's been done to our borough and this council over the last 14 years, and the consequences of which I think will stretch far into the future. So, Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Finance one very straightforward question. Despite cheering being able to set
a legal budget, and by his own admission, we still face significant financial challenges moving forward. Who does he think is to blame for this situation that the council currently finds itself in financially? Is it him and his colleagues, or is it his party in Westminster? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. Councillor Parmjit Sahota.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is really on the financial management of the budget. This Labour group on this side of the chamber have been raising concerns about the state of the budget for the last 18... Is it on? Yes, it is on. For the last 18 months. These concerns have been ignored by both Councillor Steve Clark and the leader Patrick Harley. What is more concerning for Dudley residents is that the ruling group have clearly failed to listen to the advice of its own auditors and senior officers that include the Director of Finance and Legal Services. Finance is a key risk on the corporate risk register that is managed by the Cabinet collectively with professional advice and support from senior officers. It is reviewed on a regular basis by the Cabinet leads and senior officers. This is to track the risks and take action to mitigate, reduce risks so they can become amber and green and be managed. The finance risk has been read for a long period, for some time, and senior officers have put forward measures to mitigate this risk. The Finance Cabinet lead has a clear duty of care to listen to the advice as a Cabinet member for Leader Finance to protect the finance for the borough. Please can it be explained why this advice from the Director of Finance and Legal Services has not been taken to protect our residents from the now proposed cuts across several service areas. This is gross negligence on behalf of the borough, its residents and businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sahota. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to make a couple of comments on the report before us tonight. Like many members on all sides of the chamber, I was really disappointed that a decision was made to suspend the allocation of community forum grants in year. It's something that lots of our communities rely on, and sadly was something that was necessary as part of the decision to control spending within the financial year this year. But I welcome the conversations I've had with the Cabinet member, who I know shares the disappointment that we had to take that step, but had to be financially prudent, and going forward that I hope that as soon as the spending controls are relaxed somewhat, that can be one of the first things that is looked at to reinstate from that budget that was already allocated. This is not money that we're allocating tonight. This is money that was allocated last year, and I hope that that can be reimbursed soon. I also want to quickly comment on the leisure centres and the possibility of outsourcing. Sometimes I think outsourcing can be a false economy. We know that looking at other leisure centres that have gone into whether it was trusts or any other form of organisation, a lot of the time the local authorities still have to pay significantly to deliver those services. Leisure services are something that will not make this council money. It can't be an income revenue generator because of simply the reality of the service that they provide and the cost that it takes to provide swimming pools. So I hope that whilst I understand that they have to have those conversations, that we really do consider and make sure that leisure services are one of the things that we protect and keep going in the current form. And then it's just responding to some of the comments that have been made so far during the debate. We've had some accusations levelled towards the front bench, and I look forward to hearing their responses. But certainly from my point of view, when hearing some of the comments that have been made, I find it really, really difficult to accept allegations of not being able to get to the finances of some members on this side from Councillor Ali, who a couple of years ago stood up, I think it was in this chamber and not the town hall, and put forward the most laughable amendment to a budget that I've ever seen. I was stunned that it actually had sign-off from the 151 officer. It was that bad of a budget amendment. The reason why I say that is because in that budget, one of the things that you said, and we've heard it from other members of this council, one of the things that you said was to say, we will save money by generating income by delivering services. Delivering what services? There was never any plan. It was there word for word. You were going to generate income by delivering some services. But that is the level of amendment. Unlike the Liberal Democrat amendment, which I can understand why it was put forward tonight and at least had some purpose behind it, we get a Labour amendment that doesn't really mean anything back then. And since then, what amendments have they put forward? Absolutely none. What plan has Labour had each year when we've debated this budget? Absolutely none. And the mask slipped, I think, slightly earlier when Councillor Ali was talking about the request that went into government for exceptional financial support. It slipped because he bemoaned the fact that that was withdrew. Now, the reason why it's been withdrew is because my colleagues down on the front bench have managed to bridge a significant amount of the deficit in this year by saving a lot of money on existing back office costs, because that's the first thing they look towards rather than cutting frontline services like Labour have always looked towards. Let's not forget that weekly bin collections would have been a thing in the past in 2016 had they been in control. So the mask slipped when he said that he was bemoaning that we withdrew that level of financial support, because the financial support that would have been provided to us would have been a choice of raising council tax by 10% probably, because that's what's happened in Birmingham. Now, Councillor Kieran Casey and others talk about hitting people of the borough with the charges. Well, your party would have hit them with an even greater charge, because if you'd have left that request in, that's what it would have been doing. And we wouldn't be stood here talking about a 5% council tax increase. We'd be talking about a 10% one, just like Labour-run Birmingham. So whilst I understand the situation that we're in and we have to make some difficult decisions, I am at least glad that it's been the Conservative group running the finances to ensure that we have not had to cut anywhere near as hard as the Labour Party have always done when they've run Dudley Council.
Councillor Sean Kesey.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, did you call me? I didn't hear you, sorry. I actually quite like Councillor Ali's speech. Well done. So here we are, a financial position that supposedly no one saw coming, but was oh so predictable. A financial emergency with its roots back in the tens, let's call it what it is, a politically driven mess that we now have to dig ourselves out of. Firstly, though, be under no illusion, this budget will be approved due to the numbers in the chamber. Let nobody, however, observing from the gallery, watching on YouTube or reading about it in the paper, be under any misconception. Legal budget or not, our reserves are being wiped out. The possibility of Dudley Metropolitan Borough Council issuing a Section 114 notice, in other words, declaring itself bankrupt, is very real and very near. Before my time as a councillor, I watched various budget meetings where council tax rises weren't implemented because we are a low-tax, low-spend authority. Rubbish, a bit like the claims that Mippins brought investment to us. It was a race to the ballot box, a race to the looming yearly local elections where a leaflet could say, "We froze council tax." The electorate aren't daft. Had normal rises been implemented yearly, it has been estimated that Dudley Council would be £10 million a year better off. There would be no crisis. And thus in 2024, we're left in this position. A council leadership panicking because the can cannot be kicked any further down the road. Cost cutting is upon us, services are under threat, facilities have the sword of Damocles hanging over them. Leisure centres, libraries, Dudley Town Hall, Stourbridge Town Hall, general waste collection, green waste and the associated jobs. The list goes on. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't all on Dudley Council. I take the point in a social media post published by Councillor Aston yesterday that states that since 2010, £120 million in funding to Dudley has been taken away in grant reductions. Not always a bad thing, though, as councils need to learn to spend taxpayers' money wisely, but way too far. So once again, here we are. The perfect storm is upon us. This document outlines how bad the situation is. where certain directorates have overspent and what cuts and reductions the controlling group are proposing to keep that Section 114 declaration at bay. At this point, Madam Mayor, on behalf of the independent group, I would like to propose an amendment to the budget papers and speak on my amendment. I believe Steve Griffiths has got the amendment. Thank you. Have I? Oh, I thought I had another 5. Madam Mayor, apparently I've only got 5 minutes. I didn't realise. I thought I would be able to speak for 5 on the amendment. Can you just clarify quickly? OK, I'm going to scoot through then. Every resident of Dudley is going to suffer, but we're all in this together, aren't we? No, we're not. The hardest hit in the proposals this document contains are those community groups and activists who work for nothing to enhance and support our communities. From the Gospel End Graveyard Group to Sedgley Community Centre, you, Councillor Bevan, you, Councillor Bradley, and you, Councillor Harley, and you, the Conservative group, are about to take their lifeline away. You have frozen and are about to remove the community forum funding that keeps so many of these groups alive. This wicked action shows that we're not in it together. Certainly not Councillor Harley, who lives in South Staffordshire, although apparently he does serve good ale. This is not one proposal. There's not one proposal in this budget to try and safeguard community forum funding. We must, as community councillors, try to protect some, if not all, of this precious funding. We as councillors have received 2 generous allowance increases. I'm going to skip on because I didn't realise that I wouldn't have a bit more time. But the independent group, therefore, is proposing an amendment to the budget document to include a potential reduction in the total councillors' allowance budget in order to enable a pot of money to be set aside for community forum funding. It doesn't replace all of it, but would make some funds available to these dedicated community groups. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kesey. Is there a seconder for that motion, amendment?
Madam Mayor, I formally second the amendment, and I wish to add there are community groups that require this support to maintain their work, such as library activities for the elderly, food bank for the most needy, and supporting the local areas in the whole of the community in this great work. We have talked about MIPing a lot on the money that has been 70 MIPing. We've also had councillors who've had 3 VIP tickets and 3 standard tickets to the Himley bonfire. And we've also had London trips that we had seen hotel bills paid for and trips paid for the refreshments and everything else. Surely this is an amendment that all councillors will support, that supports our most fantastic groups in our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on this amendment? Councillor Harley.
But it's quite rich for the independent group to ask for a reduction or a review into members' allowances, as by the time this review is completed, none of them will be still on this council, Madam Mayor. The facts are, Madam Mayor, that the spending controls were put in place in October of last year, and they have had an immediate impact on the finances, reducing the third-year deficit in 2027 from 27 million to barely 12, almost halved in 4 months. Now, that is the Cabinet, the officer team, members, I'll include the leader and the deputy leader of the opposition who were part of the Independent Improvement Group, who have driven a lot of that change. That is sensible, grown-up politics working together. Putting an amendment with no formal notice to either main group or the opposition group, where it can be discussed at their relevant group meetings, I believe last Wednesday for Labour, Thursday for the Conservatives. That is not the way to put amendments forward on budget night. We will not support any amendments that are not discussed at the previous Thursday's group meeting. And that is final. But this is a poor amendment, and it's a poor amendment because you cannot start tampering with those spending controls midway through this exercise. These spending controls are having a real strong and the desired effect on our budget making process. That £12 million in year 3 is not insurmountable. It is a figure that has been far higher in years gone by under both Labour and Conservative administrations, and it's one we can overcome. However, I think we all accept that the funding for community grants and community forums is important. It is possibly the one thing that the electorate look on us and community groups look on us and say, good on the local councillors, good on the council, they have £10,000 per ward, etc., etc. And that's a good thing. But these spending controls have to take effect, and we can't start unpicking them line by line, issue by issue, before we start to see real progress. And my pledge to this council, and I'm sure Councillor Lowe will do likewise as leader of the opposition, if we make sufficient progress in getting this budget under control, then I am more than happy to go through the relevant procedures, go through the Independent Improvement Board, go through Cabinet, liaising with the Finance Director and Finance Cabinet Member for Finance, and relax the controls on this particular issue. But tonight is not the night to do that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. I'm just going to go through a few of you. Councillor Foster, did you want to speak on this amendment? Okay. Councillor Bevan? No. Councillor Crumpton? No. Councillor Dudley? No. Councillor Miller?
Madam Mayor, what I feel about these grants is they help a lot of small groups. It's the lifeblood. The community centre, which I attend Kings Winford regularly, is building up again after COVID. It's taking a lot of time, and I know other places are the same. Now, this is the sort of thing, if we're going to push them backwards, I understand the financial situation. I can, whichever way you say about it, whose fault it is, you know, that's nothing to do with it really. But these groups need the money, otherwise they won't continue. Not only community associations, scouts, and I better say Girl Guides, so we've got both of us involved, and every group needs these small amounts of money. And they're such small amounts that really it's been a bit petty to take it out. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Priest, is this on the...
Am I on? Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Community forum money is incredibly important to the communities that we represent. In my own ward, it's supported Cradley Library, Friends of Homer Hill Park, Friends of Woodescote Park. Just in the last few months, it funds Christmas lights across the borough. So I was quite upset when I saw that the council was considering freezing or cutting it. I don't think we ever got to the bottom of that. Everyone deserves fair pay for fair work, and that does include councillors. But it seems to me that we're warning everybody in this borough that times are going to be a little bit tough, except the people in this chamber. I don't think it's fair for us to have a pay rise while we're telling community groups that they're going to not have a pay cut, but they're going to struggle to access funding for the foreseeable future. So I'll be supporting the independent group's amendment, and I hope some of you join me.
Councillor Lowe, is this on the amendment? Yeah. Of course.
Amendment, Madam Mayor. Firstly, for the record, many people in this council chamber will remember a budget that actually proposed a 10% reduction in the leader's allowance. I proudly moved that amendment because I recognised at that point, at a time when we were asking public servants employed by this authority to tighten their belts, it was incumbent for the leader, the deputy leader, and indeed at that point, each and every cabinet member to do likewise. And we did that proudly. Firstly, regarding Councillor Phipps' comment, rest assured, Councillor Phipps, when this administration takes control on the 2nd of May, within that first year, we are 100% confident that we will see a return of the community forum money to those communities. We will support the amendment, but we are confident that we will not require to action this amendment for the reasons that I outline. I do take the point that the council leader takes with regard to best practice, and I think what we should ensure that we can have dialogue prior to these meetings to ensure that we can amend the amendment to make it worthwhile to take forward. But I recognise the intent that the amendment is taking forward. And to remind us all is to instigate a review. If nothing else, it will put a bullet up 72 members' backsides in order to get the finances in check, to get the community forum money back into the communities to ensure that allowances are not impacted. And as part of that review, I would say that not each and every one of us in this room have the same disposable income. For many members, it's their sole input, so that needs to take part in that. And that's why I recognise, by Councillor Kesey, it's a review. So I think it's important that that forms part of it, because the impact upon some of us and the disposable income is significantly different to the impact of others within this chamber. So with those caveats, on the basis that it is simply a review and not a decision, and in the fact that I believe that all 72 of us want to ensure that each and every community, in fact, several councillors think it's not even going to be taken out this evening. It's a wake-up call about the priorities that we have as a council, that we are there to serve our communities. And access to those community funds are the first stage to say, we will listen to you. And I'll finish on this, Madam Mayor. When we've had the £122 million worth of cuts, and our council is going to be slimmer than it's ever been in history, we in this council chamber are going to be more reliant on those very community groups that we are taking the money away than ever before. So on that basis, our group will be supporting this amendment on the basis of the review, and we are confident, Madam Mayor, that that in its least will be the firework up the backside of each and every one of us to ensure that community forum money gets back sharpish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Ian Bevan, is it on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd start off just by echoing the comments of the leader. Tonight is not the night to start tampering with the spending controls. I also find it really ironic that colleagues on the other side of the chamber talk to us about not managing the finances responsibly on this side, and when we do, you complain about it. So, which is it? I think it's important, Madam Mayor, that I reiterate the comments that I made in full council last Monday, because my colleague, Councillor Kesey, seems to be having a few problems grasping what I've said. The outstanding balance is sitting in an earmarked reserve that has not been returned to the general fund. The Finance Director has proposed that this balance be left there pending a return to financial sustainability and the removal of spending controls. That, Madam Mayor, is financial responsibility. Under current spending controls, community forum grants do not meet the criteria of essential spend. Therefore, the outstanding balance cannot be accessed and no new applications can be accepted at this time.
I would encourage members to go away, to speak to their local community groups and to work with our community development workers to seek alternative non-council funding to carry out their projects. On this basis, Madam Mayor, we cannot accept this amendment this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. As there are no more speakers on the amendment, Councillor Clark, you have a right to reply.
Thank you, Councillor. I think for this amendment, we won't be supporting it just because you've literally brought it to us now. However, I do agree with Councillor Lowe, and I do think that this should be up for review as part of the spending controls. Not now, but they will be as part of the process of next year. So whilst we will not be supporting it now, we will put that into the spending review for the next financial year, because at this point, this budget needs to go through. Thank you.
So we'll go straight to the vote. And all those in favour of the amendment?
I think all the votes are in now, Madam Mayor. Those in favour of the amendment 28, those against 38. The amendment is lost.
So as the amendment is lost, we'll go back to the original, and I call on Councillor Foster to speak, please.
Mayor. Madam Mayor, setting the budget is not to be taken lightly, and I've heard lots of points made this evening by members of my own side and also members of the other side. And it's true to say that regardless of amendments made and what the outcomes have been, the finances of this council remain in a perilous state, still close to the risk of a Section 114 being issued. However, I'm sure all of us have approached the decisions that we're going to make this evening with an open mind, and I certainly have. And I've listened to the debate this evening. I've listened to my own group when we've met in private, and I've also listened to the people that I represent. And quite frankly, this is not the budget that's going to get us out of the problem that we could face in a very short amount of time in the future, for the reasons given by people on this side, that it is not a competent budget and it is short-sighted. But also as well, I cannot support this budget for another significant reason. And that is because on this side of the chamber, as you've already heard from Councillor Ali, we are committed on this side of the chamber, when we gain control, to open the books and take a close look. And that may result in changes being made. And I hope it does. And so, in all conscience, I certainly can't vote for a budget which ultimately may change. I think that would be improper and dishonest. And in fact, last year, in March, a budget was set, and then a few months later, decisions were reversed, and that came to the attention of the external auditor, and the council got into hot water for that. This is not a mistake that this administration under Labour will make. So we're treating this as a whole package. And for the sake of clarity, I won't be voting for this budget. I will be voting against. I've listened to all of the debate. I've listened to my colleagues. I've listened to the people I represent. It's in their best interests that we vote against this budget tonight. We open the books, we take a good look, we see what we can do with a number of measures that have already been discussed this evening that people are unhappy about, that are in the budget, to take this council forward. Only this side can get this council out of the perilous situation that it is heading for under this administration. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. I call on Councillor Daniel Bevan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm reminded of the resilience and determination that define our council this year. Unlike the buoyant figures we've grown accustomed to, we find ourselves navigating our way through less favourable fiscal waters. Yes, it's challenging times like this that the true mettle of our administration comes to the forefront. Councillor Clark has stood in this chamber and openly acknowledged the fact that we face a spectre of a 114 notice. A fate that befell councils in Birmingham and Nottingham, both Labour-led administrations, may I add, but we still continue to demonstrate resilience and remarkable ingenuity. Our officers and cabinet have worked tirelessly crafting a budget that not only averts crisis, but sets us on a path of growth, a feat made all the more notable by the absence of any constructive contribution from across the chamber. Madam Mayor, my engagement with politics has spanned many years, marked by milestones and memories. Among those milestones and memories is that of Councillor Ali's budget speech, which stands as a peculiar beacon of consistency. In the summer, we watch the World Cup. At Halloween, we watch horror movies. At Christmas time, we watch heartwarming family favourites. And in March, Madam Mayor, we buckle ourselves in, we hold on tight and we suspend our disbelief for the fiction that is Councillor Ali's infamous budget speech. Once again, Councillor Ali has managed to encompass the ethos of the Labour Party in one meeting. Complaints without construction, interjections without ideas, grumbles without groundwork. Madam Mayor, please send out a search party for the opposition because they're not here this evening. As we deliberate on the budget before us, let us not be distracted by the static opposition rhetoric or the allure of past speeches recycled and wheeled out for one last hurrah. Our focus must remain steadfast on the future, a future crafted through prudent fiscal management, strategic investment and a commitment to the prosperity and well-being of our community and this borough. Madam Mayor, I wholeheartedly commend this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Tim Crumpton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say I wasn't going to get up on this debate, and I actually wasn't going to. And I've got up for a couple of reasons. One is because you got legal budget came at the end of Councillor Clark's speech, and there were lots of cheers. Okay, a few months ago, or even days ago, it was almost as if you were never going to get there. And then Councillor Ali stands up, there's the shadow. And I'm sad to say, the giggling schoolboys appeared on the front bench opposite for a moment or two. This is not a matter for giggling schoolboys, is it really? The leader of this council, Madam Mayor, in one newspaper says we're doomed. I don't know whether that's what he said, because papers do misquote sometimes, don't they? But I hope we aren't doomed. I really do hope that we aren't doomed. The one problem that we face on our side of the council is that historically, when we've taken control of the council over from the Conservatives previously, we suddenly found out that we were never really told what was going on. And I think, to some extent, some of the cabinet members were never really told what was going on when they were in control from the Conservative side. And I'll just give you one example of what happened a few years ago when I became the cabinet member for Children's Services. Councillor Walker at that time, a nice lady. I never agreed with her politically, right? But I got on well with her outside of that. As Children's Services cabinet member, you wander along into the Children's Services Director office just after we take control. And I was quite surprised. There were 3 scrolls laid out in front of me. I thought that was a bit weird, but actually it was the number of services that Children's Services provided. I never realised fully the scope of it. As shadow cabinet member, we were never told by the Tory administration what the hell was going on. But the worst thing about it was, I was shown the budget for that year ahead. We were never told in this council chamber, we were never told in the scrutiny committee for Children's Services that the forecast budget for that year showed a £3 million black hole at the end of it. So one of the reasons why some people say, well, why didn't you put an amendment through for this budget tonight? And that might come up in the speech, is because it's very difficult to when you're not told the truth. It's very difficult to when the facts don't come out. Now, there was an amendment put forward a little earlier about the total operating model and the review, take out the review of the scope of library services. I'll tell you, I set up the Friends of Cradley Library, and I set it for one reason. And actually, we were in control at that time. It was because at some time I thought we might need a pressure group in Cradley Library and in every other library to stop the closures and the reduction of services in the library. I'll fight them tooth and nail. And I'll tell you, you should fight them tooth and nail, because what they provide for our kids and our adults is a safe space and a place to learn and a place to enjoy learning. So fight them right to the end, folks. The final thing I've mentioned is I'll go back to children's services. Sadly, the year after I left the children's services cabinet role, we had a bad offset report. We've had a few of them, haven't we? And the one thing I did in that year, I stood there at that very seat where Kieran's standing there, and I apologised to the children of Dudley for the fact that we didn't do enough for them. Councillor Clark, Councillor Harley, I haven't heard one word of contrition. All I've heard tonight is, we're going to get there. We're doing the greatest thing we've ever done for Dudley. We're fiscally prudent, is what somebody's just said. Are you not going to apologise to the people of Dudley for the mismanagement that you ably supported by the condemn vote which took place, what, 2010? The coalition, the periods of austerity following that you have ably and fully supported at a national level all of the way that you've been cabinet member and leader of this thing. Apologise to the people of Dudley, please. They deserve that apology. You have not looked after the finances of this council in the way that you should have done, and they're the people that will pay the price for it, as so many people have said tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Crumpton. Councillor Matt Dudley, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you pardon the budget-related pun, it's a bit rich for the Labour group to be criticising any budget set by a Conservative administration that's as successful as hopefully tonight will be, when just down the road Birmingham continues to peril in bankruptcy and has now been supported by government. And that's been echoed by my colleagues in the chamber tonight. Across the country, there are other councils that are in the same situation, run by the Labour Party. And
right, everybody else has been heard, so please can we just have a bit of respect? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As anyone here that runs a business will know, it's difficult at the best of times to manage the books. And that is the same for running a council. And when things are difficult, like stretched budgets, to make a budget work and to produce a legal budget must be the most difficult thing to do. But I'm pleased and proud that as part of the administration that we have been able to make a legal budget tonight, one that doesn't require cutting services. And with all the rhetoric we've heard, and with all the allegations and with all the suggestions that we are cutting services from the opposite side, we aren't doing that. And that's with tough times. And I recognise, like other colleagues here in the chamber, that that is because of budgets being squeezed from central government. We know that. We know that things are difficult. We also know that costs have increased. We know that wages have increased. We know that costs of materials have increased, and energy, etc., etc. But despite that, we're able to make a legal budget tonight, and that is something that we should be looking to support. I realise that there's an all-out election in May, Madam Mayor. So, of course, the opposition and the independent group and the Liberal Democrats are going to want to undermine the administration as best as possible. There are votes up for grabs. Of course there are. But this, as has already been echoed, is about grown-ups having a grown-up conversation about budgets that need to be set in difficult times. And whereas the opposition might want to play down, as to rubbish the borough when it comes to how bad things seem. As bad as the budget might be to put together, somehow we've been able to make sure it is legal without cutting services, and that's something that we should all be proud of across the chamber. And we aren't cutting libraries, and we're not cutting any other services that are vital. Yes, things are going to be difficult over the next few months and years. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Things will be difficult, and that is being recognised across the chamber. But despite that, I think that we are onto a good platform if we can get through this budget and hopefully plan for the years ahead. And having a small increase or a 4 or 5% increase in council tax, I think is a small price to pay. So we don't go and follow the examples we've had with other local councils where we've had to look at bankruptcy. And I'm proud to say that we aren't going to do that this year or any year because of the way that the budget's being managed. And I thank Councillor Clark for what must be an extremely difficult task. I don't envy you at all in a difficult situation like this. So I will be supporting the budget, but only because it's the right thing to do. Rubbishing it and making sure that we put amendments and other things in place that undermine it is not the way forward, and it certainly doesn't support the people of Dudley as we need to be doing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dudley. Councillor Rebecca Collins, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start with a quote from Councillor James Jameson, which was recently included on the front page of the Local Government First magazine. 90 to 95% of what we do in local government has nothing to do with politics. Yet here we find ourselves having listened to at least a 20-minute long complaint by Councillor Ali about the Conservative government and how this is all the Tories' fault. Madam Mayor, I'd like to share some reflections on the difference in the way Conservative-led councils and Labour-led councils approach matters of such importance. I've been proud of how this Conservative council has worked hand in hand with the external agencies the second that unforeseen financial challenges came to light. Being proactive around the measures we need to take to protect the services our residents rely on, with savings carefully considered and efficiently redesigning our existing services, whilst Labour would have salami-sliced services, then blamed it on the Tories. Thanks to this proactivity, we have managed to maintain some really important policies, maintain free parking, and have protected leisure and frontline services. Whilst charging for green waste has always been seen as an absolute last resort, I'm pleased that we'll now see an improved service, operating all year round, and feedback in conversation with residents around this has proved positive, and that they are looking forward to this extended service. Moving swiftly on, I'd like to express my gratitude to staff at the cost of living hubs. These have been a massive success in assisting individuals and families with the current crisis. On more than one occasion, we have heard the opposition complain about the way that these are operated and how some miss out, yet they offer no suggestion on how this can be addressed. They are quick to tell us what we are not doing, yet offer no advice on how they would do it, even if that meant that the service is improved for their residents. Madam Mayor, perhaps this is due to a lack of ability to provide sensible, data-led plans without salami-slicing services and reducing important services in the most deprived areas, which, mostly, I'd like to remind you, fall within traditionally Labour-held wards. And let's be honest, we only need to look at the PCC to see how Labour spend other people's money. Victims of crime being let down by a police force placed into special measures, while the neighbourhood police service have their hands tied and are unable to offer the comprehensive service our residents are entitled to through their council tax contributions. I have listened with interest to the debate this evening and will leave our residents with one more quote. The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. That's from Baroness Margaret Thatcher. I fully support this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Councillor Laura Taylor-Childs, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not really sure where to start, to be honest. Councillor Ali accused us to trying to keep a lid on the self-referral to the regulator and that they had to force an extraordinary meeting. Yet again, members of the council, this is just scaremongering. Both groups of the chamber were briefed and fully informed of the circumstances, and they were also told that we were in the process of engaging with our tenants to be able to make sure that they were fully aware of the situation and weren't frightened. But yet again, the opposition took the opportunity to grandstand. Yet again, the opposition took the opportunity to frighten the most vulnerable members of our society for their own benefit. And yet again, party politics before the people of this borough. Madam Mayor, it's quite clear from the comments tonight that those on the opposite benches don't understand how to effectively manage our housing stock, but they don't even line up their arguments. Councillor Ali begins by criticising us for our recent acquisition of 8 properties, 8 4-bedroom properties that are going to provide lovely homes for families that are in the most need. Not really sure where your criticism can come from there, but that's on you if that's how you feel. Councillor Cowell follows up by then saying that we need more properties. So it's probably a good idea to line up your arguments before you stand up in this chamber. Councillor Ali also says the words that he bears no responsibility for our budget, and Councillor Crumpton refers to historically not being told the true financial situation. Unfortunately, Councillor Crumpton, that is not the case in this scenario. The leaders of the opposition have been fully informed of this budget from, I've been in those meetings, Councillor Crumpton, they've sat in Budget Summit and had full updates on this budget. So it may have been the case historically, and I can't speak to your previous experiences. However, in this situation, the members on the opposite benches are fully informed of this position. Therefore, there is no excuse for no amendments if the opposition feel that they could have done a better job, or if the opposition feels that money could have been spent more wisely, or if you feel that there was a more prudent way for us to approach the challenges that we currently face. No excuse at all. The moans and groans, therefore, just become totally meaningless. I also think that the opposition parties seem to forget that no party in control, whether it's national or local, can control overseas issues. No one can control overseas wars, and no one can control the impact of overseas affairs on our economy. What's really important, however, Madam Mayor, is how each authority responds to these challenges. It's clear that the opposition has absolutely no idea to deal with any crisis, and let's face it, there were salami slicing services at a time where there wasn't a great deal of financial challenge on this chamber. I think the comments around telecare also show that there's a complete lack of understanding of what telecare actually is and what it's for. If they'd paid attention to the decision, they'd know that the decision was made to remove the outdated tenure-based eligibility, which was left within the Housing Directorate, and move to a needs-based eligibility, which would be administered by adult social care, which is precisely the right place where it should sit, being a life-saving service. It should go to those who need it the most, not those who can afford it. So again, Madam Mayor, I would just reiterate, the moans from the opposite side of this room are really pointless, and there is absolutely no excuse for a no amendment if they feel they could have done better. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ruth Buttery, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As usual, we have from Labour all sound bites and no structure. It is quite clear that the Labour group have no plan, no clue and no hope for this borough. Madam Mayor, while recognising the challenging times we are in, it is more crucial than ever to have a plan for children and families in this borough, and the Conservatives do, not only to raise the aspirations but also the opportunities for children to fulfil their potential. This is why, as an administration, we have taken bold decisions to invest in our services with additional funding such as the Family Safeguarding Programme, which is now delivering with more families supported earlier so that they don't go into crisis. A recent staff survey highlighted that family safeguarding has created opportunities for recruitment, retention and career progression. The restorative approach to recruitment with the introduction of children's interview panels, and I can assure you those staff who have been interviewed by children say that it's much tougher than being interviewed by adults. Continued commitment to training with the Centre for Professional Practice. And what I was personally delighted to read, a recent inspection feedback confirmed that we know our children well, and that this is evident in every file recording. And the outworking of this, agency staff have reduced, sickness has reduced, caseloads have reduced, newly qualified ASYEs have increased. This is a service that is thriving. Madam Mayor, we have delivered time and time again, raising not just the aspirations but also the opportunities for children and young people here in Dudley. Eton is much more than a sixth form, with its outreach workers already working in schools. So yes, Councillor Ali, it is still ongoing and it is happening. The DSG, we have mapped our alternative provision and SEND provision across the borough. Which children's provision would you cut, Councillor Ali? Which parent are you going to speak to say their children can't have the specialist school they need? Which children's places are you going to stop? I've been working, not moaning, and working with the LGA to raise this with central government, and in the meantime doing something about it in the borough, as you've probably seen in the news today with Halesbury getting additional investment. And Councillor Crumpton clearly never asked any questions and can assure you that Councillor Ridney has been kept informed throughout. And I'm sure you're aware that if we don't set a legal budget, then all non-statutory services are stopped. Well, I'll continue, Madam Mayor. We have set up child-friendly Dudley, recognising it takes a village to raise a child and bring different sectors together, recognising that, yes, life is challenging and hard sometimes, but giving children the resilience, determination and community to succeed and overcome these challenges, to help them prepare for adulthood and train for work. We have the Institute of Technology, very light rail, and soon a £25 million health science unit in collaboration with Worcester University, levelling up funds used by colleges in the borough. For those children who need additional support, we have opened inclusive hubs throughout all ages, rebuilding Penn's Meadow for those with the most profound disabilities, making sure they have the very best provision available. We opened 5 family hubs in August, making sure that help and support is there for all families, whatever the age of the child. And the list goes on and on of investment and success. I would, Madam Mayor, like to thank not only the fantastic, dedicated, hard-working staff in children's services who deliver this day in and day out, but my cabinet colleagues, and especially the leader, Councillor Harley, who has supported me and the service on the bold, brave choices and decisions that have been made to make sure that children here in Dudley get the very best, delivering a plan, raising aspirations and the opportunity for the very best future they deserve. Madam Mayor, I commend this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Buttery. Councillor Pete Lowe, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, there's 122 million reasons why the people of Dudley should never trust the Conservative Party again. 122 million pound since 2010 taken away from the hard-working Boston people of this borough. And to say there's no such thing as politics demonstrates the futility of the argument. Now let us go back to 2010 and remember the issue of austerity, aided and abetted by our good friends in the Liberal Democrats. Councillor Priest, quite right. This budget and the impact of the budget is not fair on communities. It's not fair on the Unicorn Centre, but their party, in bed with the Conservative Party from 2010 to 2015, must bear their element of responsibility. We then talk, and it's important for history, to look at the council tax rises of 2013, 14 and 15. And people will know that the Conservative government, aided and abetted by the Liberal Democrats, gave the same money in order to freeze council tax. The issue is that it was one-off money and not built into the base. Your responsibility, your government's responsibility, and don't you dare try and blame the Labour Party for that. However, we can then go on to fast forward to 2017, and Steve Clark, Calamity Clark, who passes an amendment to restrict by 1% money to this council. That would mean this evening we would have an additional £7 million in our money. We have reserves of less than 20%. How do we get to that position? Shame on us. We then have Councillor Bevan the Younger, who starts to talk about fiscal responsibility of Steve Clark, who said on the 24th of October 2023 that this is hysteria. We are nowhere near bankruptcy, fiscal responsibility. The 10th of January, oh my goodness, how that tune has changed. There's a real possibility of declaring ourselves bankrupt. That's your fiscal responsibility and not on our watch. And let's be quite clear, Madam Mayor. The Councillor Ali will be standing up again this time next year, reading the budget speech. The difference is he'll be doing this as leader, as shadow lead member for finance. Yeah. Do you know, that actually sounds like not a bad idea, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. No, I'm warming to it. I've got another 40 seconds to reflect on that one. But Councillor Clark, I think, will go down in history as the lead member who squandered millions of pounds from this council. And when we take control on the 2nd of May, when Councillor Bevan is no longer Councillor Bevan the Younger, but he's watching on Teams or up in the gallery, he will watch with pride Councillor Ali, a Labour administration, putting real footing back and prioritising the interests of each and every one of our community, with community funding back into the hands of those that deserve it most. We will be voting against, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Phil Atkins, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Being a councillor is a privilege. And as we sit here today, we all have a responsibility to ensure the residents of our borough are served in the best possible way. Despite a year of challenging financial constraints, I'm proud of the fantastic work undertaken this year by officers and councillors on this side of the chamber. We've worked tirelessly to ensure a legal but still positive budget is passed tonight. But yet another year has passed with a whole lot of words from opposites. Some might say far too many words from some members, but no ideas, no plan offered tonight or any night, in fact. Not a single solitary suggestion was made by members opposite. Inaction should be a Labour byword. Under this administration, we've continued to deliver on the big projects. My Dudley, the largest single change to reporting of issues, and the provision of services rolled out successfully. We've protected leisure centres and ensured the people of the borough remain at the heart of our decisions. Our procurement team, labelled by the opposition as unnecessary at the time of creation, has seen savings of over £4 million on the renewal of procurement and of the council's contracts. Ambition is what separates us. Ambition for the best our borough can offer. Ambition for every resident to be able to fulfil their potential. Ambition that children with the highest level of need have one of the best schools in the region to attend. Left up to Labour, those councillors opposite would have stripped away anything of value with no forethought to the implications. It's taken months and long days of hard work by officers of the council and members of this side of the chamber. This budget is a step towards ensuring the sustainable future of this council, and I support it wholeheartedly, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Councillor Thomas Russon, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The idea of civic service has been in my family and personal life for a long time. My family has been in Halesowen for 300 years now. I am black country in the blood, Halesowener in my soul. After a career change brought me back home, I saw a lot of things that I didn't like. A lot of things about the place that I'd grown up that I didn't appreciate. The changes that have been wrought on my hometown and the wider borough. So I decided to get involved. I now find myself as part of an administration faced with a horrible challenge that I've seen no better solutions to the problem presented by anyone on any side, and that they're ultimately navigating turbulent waters, rising to the challenge of safeguarding the most vulnerable. The people of the Black Country are a hardy people. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. We've had centuries of challenge living in the crucible of the Industrial Revolution. Again, I don't think anybody's truly happy with the striving that has been necessary to create a legal budget. But a budget is needed, and a budget we have before us now, one that will save us from collapse into the morass that has been discussed at lengths that other councils are experiencing. I don't want our residents to find themselves in dire straits with the hideous cuts to services, with the vast increases in tax and similar. I'm a Conservative with both a big and a small C, and I believe that government should be both as large and as expensive as it needs to be. That it exists to serve the people, not itself. Its duty, to plagiarise a bit, is the protection of life and the enrichment thereof. While I'm a member of the Conservative Party, I am here first and foremost to serve those who elected me. I cannot do that if the council is bankrupt. I now have 2 small children, both of whom I will be able to teach to swim in Halesowen and Stourbridge leisure centres, both of which would quite possibly have been closed a long time in the hands of others. As such, I'm deeply proud of the work that this administration and all others that have been involved in it have worked on to create, in spite of all that will doubtless be necessary in the future. Complaining is easy, change is hard, work is hard. But we are Black Country and we are not afraid of a bit of hard work. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Russon. Councillor Ryan Priest, you are next to speak, but as you have already spoken on the motion and the previous amendment, you can't speak again, unfortunately. You spoke when you moved the amendment at the beginning, before you moved the amendment. Go on, I'll let you this once.
I'll try my best not to make you regret it. This is my first budget meeting. I'm not a political, or I'm not as much as a political anorak that I watched council budget meetings before I got elected, not all of them, at least. I actually think debate should be better than this. I'm tired of hearing about Labour-run Birmingham. It's nothing to do with the residents of Dudley. It doesn't benefit this debate. It certainly doesn't benefit the residents that we represent. And to criticise opposition parties of all colours and none is an incredibly odd move. We have a role to fulfil in this chamber. The administration is there to lead, not reign over Dudley, and the opposition is here to scrutinise and, when necessary, oppose their positions. What I've actually seen from the administration is criticism of the quality and not the contents of opposition speeches tonight. I'm going to be voting against this budget, as I alluded to in my amendment, because it's not fair. But I don't think that this debate has been of good service to the people that we represent.
Thank you, Councillor Priest. Councillor Rogers.
My name is We will explore all avenues to achieve the CHC money we are entitled to. And on Unicorn Centre, everyone will be assessed and all individual needs will be met. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rogers. Councillor Bradley, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A really interesting debate tonight. The one thing that I think a couple of points have been missed. The truth is, the absolute truth is that we didn't know prior to September that the adult social care and the children's were such a high amount for this last year. We didn't know. So what I will say is, since then, since October, when we did understand the actual financial pressures that we were under, in just a few months, this administration has implemented spending controls on ourselves, which have already saved £4 million, with 17.4 million of savings have been identified to date. 17.4 million pounds have been identified to date in just 4 months. We have suspended our own council plan and put in a new one-year council plan to set out the key priorities in support and delivery of the improvement programme, in support of the total operating model that will be coming. This authority has stood up the Improvement and Sustainability Programme, set up a £3.3 million contingency fund, arranged our own assurance board. We've arranged our own assurance board to challenge us, to scrutinise us, to make sure that we're going down the correct path. Only this administration has the knowledge, the experience and the passion to deliver the savings this council needs to achieve going forward to shape a strong authority fit for the difficult financial pressures of this 21st century. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Harley, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just address a few of the speakers. One was Councillor Crumpton, who said that he quite rightly apologised for the state of children's services when he was cabinet member. That was the right thing to do. The state of children's services were an utter disgrace, councillor, and you should bear responsibility for that and apologise. And to Councillor Lowe, who are very good at grandstanding about the zero increase in council tax for 5 years. And I think we've both acknowledged that was a mistake. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. But the Labour group does bear some responsibility because the Conservative group under previous leaderships froze that council tax for 2 years. You under a previous leader, granted it wasn't yourself, it was Dave Sparks, froze it for 3 years. So you do have a responsibility and you must accept that responsibility as to why we are now £10 million short. And if we do that, then that is adults in the room debating a budget and accepting past mistakes. Then move on to Councillor Ali in his speech. I think the one thing we can agree on, Madam Mayor, all 72 of us, is I think next year we'll make sure that all the finance spokespersons get their speech in under 5 minutes, because I don't think any of us could suffer that again. It was half an hour of absolute garbage. It really is. And really, if you want another vocation, councillor, try prescribing, you could do an audio, you could do a recording of that speech, because it would solve insomnia, it really would. Madam Mayor, Councillor Ali went on about leisure centres. Clearly, under the party opposite, leisure centres would be at real risk. We've had cabinet meetings where the Labour front bench has criticised us from October onwards, saying that we need to go further and faster. That can only mean one thing, Madam Mayor: cuts to frontline services. Now, Councillor Bradley is quite correct. The shortfall and overspending in adult social care wasn't known to Cabinet and indeed the vast majority of officers until late September, early October. The moment we knew that we had similar issues to that, such as Nottingham and Birmingham City Council, we took the correct measures. An October Cabinet with spending controls put in place. And those spending controls are now starting to bite, and by biting they are working. A near £30 million deficit in 2027 reduced to barely 12. And Madam Mayor, there are more funds to put into this budget that have just come too late to put into this report. That make our financial position even more improved. And yes, we have looked a 114 in the face, but we are facing that 114 down. And we're not going to stand here and sit here and moan about the state of the nation. Have we had enough money from government? Haven't we? This is Dudley's budget, and it should be Dudley politicians that resolve it and sort it out, and not look to blame others. And Madam Mayor, we are resolving this budget. That deficit cut by almost half in just 4 months. And with the Independent Improvement Board, who just last week said to us, you have now brought yourselves time to really look at that new total operating model. A new operating model that doesn't have the knee-jerk response the opposition wanted, which was to cut and slash frontline services. It gives you that breathing space to implement a new total operating model that is sustainable and one that we hope still delivers the vast majority of what we deliver now. Very quickly, Madam Mayor, Councillor Rowley mentioned a few things that he thinks have been wrong for the people of this borough. Black Country Plan. Well, I'm glad they wanted to build on Kingsford green spaces and green belts. This side of the chamber didn't. My stance on the Black Country Plan has been vindicated again and again and again. Madam Mayor, Eton College, he really does need to learn his brief and keep up to date. Eton College is very much still in the mix and coming to Dudley, as is the ice rink, Madam Mayor, and we'll have an announcement about that very shortly with the plans for that coming along very nicely. And then he talks about the hospitality quarter. I believe, Madam Mayor, a planning application for the museum has gone in, and if it's not, it's very imminent now. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oh, Madam Mayor, I also would move that the question now be put. Thank you.
Speaker left. I'm going to let that last speaker speak and then we'll put it to the vote. Councillor John Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, much like Councillor Crumpton, I wasn't going to speak tonight because obviously wonderful front bench on the Labour side of the chamber have done such a magnificent job holding the administration to account. But I did request to speak, mainly as a point of information really, but as the Leader of the Council was in full flight, I saw no reason to interrupt his delusion and wait to be called. My point of information really was a basic question. We've heard different stories from different speakers on the Conservative benches tonight. We've heard from Councillor Matt Dudley, who believes that there are no cuts in this budget, no cuts proposed. And yet we hear from the Deputy Leader of the Conservative group and the Council that not only have they already saved £4 million, that they've identified another £17 million worth of cuts. Madam Mayor, both reasons, both suggestions cannot be true. And whilst most of the Conservative benches are suffering from a group delusion, Madam Mayor, neither do the people of Dudley, believe a word of it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Steve Clark to make his reply, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to take these in reverse order. Councillor Martin, they are savings, not cuts. You've got £4 million worth savings, not cuts.
Well, that says it all. What's the difference?
Yeah. Is that what you said?
You
What's
did.
the difference? Jeez. Councillor Ruston, you're quite right with the leisure centres. When we took control, it was the Labour group that were going to shut Stourbridge, shut Hell's Owen and put one in Lye. That's what was happening. That's when we took over and we managed to keep control of them. Councillor Lowe, I've got to say, I'm surprised at your hypocritical comments tonight, but I'm absolutely not. To be clear, this administration has maintained complete transparency in respect of the challenges that we face this year. We've nothing to hide. All of the challenges come from issues beyond our control. Not only is Councillor Lowe aware of all of this, but he's been party to all discussions, including being part of the Improvement Assurance Board, even in Budget Summit. The same with Councillor Foster when she made her comments earlier. It's really unfortunate that Councillor Ali does not appear to have been kept abreast of the situation by his own group leader and deputy leader. And it's continuing, and he's continuing with his own misguided narrative. Now, let's just go through some more of these questions. Councillor Collins, you are quite correct in your sayings, as well as Councillor Dudley. Councillor Crumpton, I'm going to come to you in my summing up a bit later in my answers. Councillor Bevan, quite constructive. Councillor Foster, I've just addressed what you've just said. You've been aware of everything all the way along the line. Councillor Kesey, you're quite right in terms of the frozen tax, the frozen council tax. The government gave us money for both sides, and the leaders just summed that up. If we had had that money, we would be far better off now. And, you know, mistakes were made then, and as I addressed in my opening remarks. Councillor Phipps, with the forum funding, I can assure you, Councillor Phipps, that as soon as the spending controls are lifted, one of the first things we will do is reinstate the forum funding. Councillor Sahota, again, I will answer you in my summing up. Councillor Casey, you asked who is to blame, and you asked about austerity funding. But just bear with me, why did we have to go through austerity? Do you remember why we went through austerity? Does anyone remember why we had to go through austerity? They'd spent all the money. We had to go through 10 years of austerity because this lot had spent all the money. And now that they're blaming us for austerity, I'm sorry, that argument...
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt here. Every single person near enough in this room has had the opportunity to speak this evening, and everybody has listened to everyone except for on the odd occasion where I've had to come in and ask people to be quiet. I don't care which side of the chamber you are on. Please do not speak while somebody is speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Baton, the housing budget was last week. You're referring to it now. That was last week. Councillor Cowell, with reference to your the extra homes, I think you two need to start talking about either getting extra homes or not extra homes, or you just need to get talking together. Councillor Aston, I will come to you with your NHS funding in my final summing up. Councillor Westwood, you talked about the increases in wages and costs. That is an inflationary pressure that we have all had to address. And so whilst the numbers look really high, that is because inflation has been very, very high over this last couple of years. Now, I'm going to come to Councillor Ali. My goodness. Councillor Ali talks repeatedly about how we were warned about the financial situation. For years, he says. He's clearly read the auditor's reports and is repeating them to you tonight. But the point on which he is entirely incorrect is that we ignored this. Absolutely incorrect. Unfortunately for him, statistics don't lie. We heeded the advice of the auditors and we acted. We took control of Labour's budget in 2017-18, which left £2.6 million in year 3. That's what you left. By last year, we'd not only increased the reserves to £25.1 million and have been leading the council on a trajectory towards a more comfortable, sustainable position, but we'd also reduced borrowing by 15 million. But of course, this doesn't fit Councillor Ali's narrative. So understandably, he's minded to elaborate on out of context information. So, Madam Mayor, I'd like to provide you with some context around the opposition's position and to provide some insight into how they would have managed the period of instability that has just gripped councils up and down the nation this year. On the 4th of December last year, Councillor Ali stood up in the chamber, this chamber, and asked me what we will cut to balance the budget. That's right, what we're going to cut. There was no thought in Councillor Ali's mind of constructively managing our back office costs or working hard to streamline our existing services and create efficiencies. His automatic response to the pressures within our budget is to cut. Councillor Lowe asked me the same question during cabinet meetings, and I think it says it all. And to add, Madam Mayor, this progress was all achieved in-house. Good quality in-house financial management versus automatic assumption of the need to bring in consultants to cut services, which is what you did last time. This time last year, we were here proposing a council tax increase. And I'd like to remind the chamber of what Councillor Ali said. And don't worry, I won't repeat the entire 25-minute rant focused on national government. And have you noticed he did it again? He didn't only do it last year, he's done it again. Oh my goodness. Once was quite enough. He said, and I quote, "There is no need to raise council tax." That's what you said last year. There is no need to raise council tax. Rather than thinking of Dudley, he was simply parroting the National Labour Party policy. Yeah. Party politics over the needs of our borough. If Councillor Ali had been in control of the budget last year and passed the 0% increase, he would have already been forced to issue a section 114 already. Failure. Let me repeat that. Under Councillor Ali's version of responsible management of the finances, this council would have already had to declare itself bankrupt. Earlier in the year, the Labour group wanted to proceed with an application to government for exceptional financial support, and were in favour of imposing council tax increases of up to 20%. They wanted to follow their colleagues and put Dudley residents under the same financial stress as those in Birmingham. They did. That's exactly what they wanted to do. Madam Mayor, Councillor Ali's narrative does not change despite the financial position clearly improving. And I would like to remind members of the words of our auditors last week. They said, since we wrote the report, there has been positive movement in the budget. That's what they said, right there. His repetitive narrative is likely, excuse me, can I get some water? Cheers. Excuse me. Thank you. Yeah, it's gin, yeah. His repetitive narrative is likely because he has no idea of how to address the issues that we're facing without immediate, damaging frontline cuts. Not a clue. Instead, we hear time and time again the same issues being raised. Maybe it would be prudent for Councillor Ali to attend key meetings to gain a full understanding of these issues he claims to feel so strongly about. So for clarity, Councillor Ali didn't show up to the Cabinet last month where this budget was being heard. He didn't show up. He's also calling for the inquiry into the handling of MIPIN. You mentioned it tonight. Somehow, he missed the fact that this has already happened. He was invited, but failed to attend along with the rest of the Labour members. Perhaps we should refer to him now as no-show showcat. I'd like to take a moment to congratulate the hard work that has been undertaken by our adult social care team. Last year, Councillor Lowe said, "You will not get the money from the NHS that this budget is built on." You said that. This year, our teams have been working hard and have so far secured £5 million in continuing healthcare funding, which is based on what you said earlier. He criticised the council for relying on the support of the NHS. However, he seems to miss the point that if someone is entitled to NHS care, they should receive it. And it's grossly unfair to expect a local authority to cross-subsidise NHS functions. Madam Mayor, whilst this year has brought great challenge, it's also provided us with a great opportunity, an opportunity to really drive out efficiencies within services and to reflect on our best practice. National issues have caused us to stare 114 in the face, as the leader said. However, we heeded the advice of the 151 officer and our external auditors and acted swiftly to avoid disaster. We do acknowledge that the auditors would have liked us to have gone further with certain budget reductions. However, we did not feel it was the right time to be reducing services in such a drastic way. But we didn't take the easy way out and salami slice services, which is exactly what would have happened had the opposition been in control. Our budget is honest, it's transparent, it protects the most vulnerable residents and secures services. This administration recognises our responsibility to residents and not our responsibility to engage in playground politics like the party opposite. We owe it to our residents to make the best use of their money and not to salami-sized services. We owe it to our residents to be open and transparent in our actions and not oppose a budget only to abstain from the vote. We owe it to our residents. We owe it to our residents to be consistent and not claim to be concerned about the affordability of our proposals, but be in favour of a huge council tax hikes behind closed doors, which is just what the opposition is doing. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I welcome the vote on this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
In line with Council Procedure Rule 16.4, I will now put the original motion to a recorded vote.
I think all the votes are now cast, Madam Mayor. Those in favour, 39. Those against, 27. The motion is carried.
Thank you. That is carried, so there is no urgent business, so this concludes the meeting of the Council. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I nicked your pen.